Governor Henry Smith determined that it was time for a showdown. On January 9th, 1836, he addressed a scalding missive to council members accusing them of fomenting an unlawful filibustering mission and appointing their own generalissimo to command it. He further charged councilmen with sacrificing Texas on a shrine of plunder. As if that were not inflammatory enough, Smith then allowed his rhetoric to run rampant. His anger flowed over the council like lava.
Look around upon your flock. Your discernment will easily detect the scoundrels. The complaint, contradiction of the eyes, the gape of the mouth, the vacant stare, the head hung, the restless, fidgety disposition, the sneaking, sycophantic look, a natural meanness of countenance, an unguarded shrug of the shoulders, a sympathetic tickling and contraction of the muscles of the neck, anticipating the rope, a restless uneasiness to adjourn, dreading to face the storm they themselves have raised.
This was but a prelude to the substance of his tirade. Smith explained that the council services were no longer needed. He avowed that he would
continue to discharge my duties as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy and see that the laws are executed.
Smith had thrown down the gauntlet, and the council took it up. 2 days later, members reviewed their rancorous relationship with the governor. In their proclamation to the people of Texas, councilmen insisted that Smith's behavior had left them but one alternative. They levied charges of impeachment against him for the manifest injuries and difficulties he has endeavored to bring upon this country. Smith fired the council. The council fired him right back. At that juncture, the political climate became genuinely anarchic. For a while, Texas was blessed with 2 governments, each at odds with the other. The council declared Smith's lieutenant governor, James W. Robinson, to be acting governor. Moreover, military commanders in the field, agents in the United States, and all Texian officials were to report to him. On January 18th, Smith declared that the council
did not make, nor can they break me.
He still insisted that he was the rightful governor and refused to hand over the archives. For its part, the General Council ignored Smith and continued to meet sporadically. As for the people of Texas, they were uncertain who possessed the legal authority, and few seemed to care. Everyone knew that a convention was to meet in Washington on March 1st, at which time delegates would organize a permanent government anyway. Truthfully, few were the Texians who had ever paid much attention to the actions of the provisional government. Even fewer mourned its breakdown. One who did was Colonel James C. Neal. At Bear were some 21 artillery pieces of various caliber. Because of his artillery experience and his regular Army commission, Neal was a logical choice to command. Throughout January, he did his best to fortify the old mission on the outskirts of town. If the Centralists launched another offensive into Texas, Neal and his men constituted the first line of defense. Far from the bulk of Texas settlements, the garrison suffered from a lack of even basic provender. On January 14th, Neal wrote Houston that his people were in a torpid, defenseless condition. By January 17th, Houston had begun to question the wisdom of maintaining the Bayer garrison. On that date, he informed Governor Henry Smith that Colonel James Bowie and a company of volunteers had left Goliad for San Antonio. On January 19th, Bowie rode into the Alamo compound, and what he saw impressed him. As a result of much hard work, the mission had begun to look like a real fort. Neal, who knew the consequences of leaving El Camino Real unguarded, convinced Bowie that the Alamo was the only defensive stronghold between the enemy and Anglo settlements. Neal's arguments and his leadership electrified Bowie. As he explained to Governor Smith,
I cannot eulogize the conduct and character of Colonel Neal too highly. No other man in the Army could have kept men at this post, under the neglect they have experienced.
On February 2nd, Bowie wrote Smith that he and Neal had resolved to die in these ditches before they would surrender the post. The letter confirmed Smith's understanding of controlling factors. He had concluded that the Texian rebels must hold San Antonio. Rejecting Houston's advice, Smith prepared to funnel additional troops and provisions to the town. In brief, Houston had asked for permission to abandon the post. Smith considered his request. The answer was no.
No.
If the Alamo were to function as an early warning station, Neal had to have outriders. Smith directed Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis's Legion of Cavalry to report to San Antonio. Travis resisted, but at length he rode toward Bayer with only 30 horsemen. Reinforcements began to trickle in. On February 3rd, Travis's cavalrymen reached the Alamo. Like Bowie, he soon became committed to Neal and the fort, which he began to describe as the key to Texas. About February 8th, former U.S. Congressman David Crockett arrived with a group of American volunteers. On February 14th, Neal departed on furlough. He learned that illness had struck his family and that they desperately needed him back in Neenah. He promised that he would resume command when circumstances permitted.
I'll be back.
Certainly within 20 days, and left Travis in charge as acting post commander. Neal had not intended to slight the older and more experienced Bowie, but Travis, like Neal, held a regular Army commission. Travis received reports that Santana's Centralist Army had crossed the Rio Grande. Travis believed that His Excellency could not reach Bayer until at least March 15th. His arrival in San Antonio on February 23rd convinced him otherwise.
Oh my God.
Travis and Bowie understood that they could not hold the town with their skeleton force, and so took refuge in the abandoned mission across the San Antonio River. The plan had always been that the picket garrisons at Bayer and Goliad would alert the government upon the enemy's approach. The rebel forces would assemble at those vital choke points and halt the Centralists before they drove into the heart of the Texian settlements. The Alamo garrison could hold for a while, but not indefinitely. Their fate now rested with the General Council in San Felipe, Fannin at Goliad, and other Texian volunteers who might rush to assist the beleaguered garrison. Ominously, the provisional government that would have coordinated those relief efforts had ceased to exist.